Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Mr. Zombie here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 5 of What If Izuku Had a Villain Quirk. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So, we begin. Pro Hero 13 led the class through the enormous dome-shaped structure, pointing out each section the training building contained.
I created this facility to prepare you to face different types of disasters. I call it the Unforeseen Simulation Joint.
She passionately strikes a pose at the students.
But you can call it USJ.
A collective thought of what each location held flashed across all the students' minds as Eraserhead walked over to have a quick chat with his colleague, questioning the location of All Might. He sighed as it was revealed that he had used up too much energy before school started, saving the day, and had called earlier explaining that he'd be able to make it at the very end of training. He gave the room to 13, who began a lecture of the amazing power of quirks and the danger that some came with. Her tone was deadly serious, as she referred to the training exercises Toshinori and Aizawa had run through with them as an example of how their quirks could be potentially life-threatening, and ended her speech by reminding the young students that their purpose as heroes was to help civilians and the like. Cheers came from the class, a sign that the talk was well received. Their teacher quickly cut them off, about to tell them where they would be training when the lights in the building flickered off. The fountain in front of 1A sputtered as a violent rift seemed to materialize from nothing and grow ever larger, as Shota stiffened and turned in an instant, already in a tense position. A blue-haired figure stepped out from the rift. A beat followed before people started coming out of it in droves, confusing the students who thought it was part of the training. A few tried to step forward but were harshly told to stay back. This isn't part of the training. Their sensei began to don thick yellow goggles of some sort. Those are real villains! Murmurs of fear quietly echoed the now silent building as the mist slowly began gathering into a singular spot. A voice spoke from the mist as it combined into a human form.
The only real heroes I see are 13 and Eraserhead.
The smoke was now near the center of the villains as a tall, monstrous figure.
Perplexing. The schedule we secured from UA said that All Might would be present as well.
The greasy-haired hero quickly made the connection to the press's infiltration of UA as a guise for the villains to retrieve the information they needed. A villain with a hand covering his face spoke in a gravelly tone to no one in particular. When he brought up the subject of killing a few of the students to get the symbol of peace to come out and play, their sensei's capture tool burst out as his eyes grew crimson and his hair rose into the air. What? Real villains? No way! Kirishima spoke up from the rest of the students. How could so many of them get into a UA facility this secure? His words prompted Momo to agree and ask 13 why the alarms of USJ weren't sounding off. 13 could only respond with uncertainty as a heterochromatic boy also made his voice heard. He thought aloud whether or not this was the only place they were attacking, before dismissing it to make the important observation that one of the heathens below them were doing something to mask their presence there. They carefully chose this isolated facility as an entry point at a time where a class was being taught. They're fools for trespassing here. Todoroki's eyes narrowed in deep thought. But they thought this out. Whatever their plan must be, they have a concrete objective. But what is it? Eraserhead began issuing out commands, asking 13 to contact UA when realizing they might be jamming their communications with the campus as well. Instead, asking Kaminari to do so. Harlequin eyes shot towards the teacher, with a deep anxiety filling them. What are you doing, Sensei? You can't fight them on your own? The man acknowledged his nervous student. There are far too many of them. Even if you manage to erase some of their quirks, your fighting style is much more suitable for stealth and sneak attacks. You can't be a hero with only one trick. The teacher said as he leapt into action. A group of villains caught sight of him and prepared to fire at him, only to discover their quirks were malfunctioning as red eyes stared at them through yellow protective goggles. Gray bandages grappled them and slammed them together as a villain realized exactly who he was. A multi-armed villain charged toward the smaller man, confident in his ability, only to be punched away by Aizawa, tossed his captive at a pair of felons on the side. The villain standing next to what happened appeared to be a mutation quirk holder, with an exposed brain began analyzing the situation as he watched the pro hero take down his allies. He found that the goggles we wore prevented them from knowing whose quirk he was erasing, and that made it near impossible for them to work together to take the black-clad man down. The students began to retreat, Ida having to snap Midoriya out of a trance as he too analyzed the fight. The two joined the herd of hero students following 13. Just as they reached the exit, another rift appeared and a misty villain appeared in front of them. Aizawa saw the void villain he identified as the most troublesome in the bunch. He had come between his students and the exit and attempted to follow after them, only to be cornered in by more criminals. He heard a booming voice come from the golden-eyed mist as he spoke to his pupils and instructors.
It's a pleasure to meet you all. We are the League of Villains. I know it's impolite, but we decided to invite ourselves into this haven of justice to say hello. Besides, is this not a fitting place for All Might, the symbol of peace, to take his last breath?
The tail end of his introduction made a jungle hair boy feel as if ice water was poured over him.
I believe he was supposed to be here today, and yet I see no signs of him. There must have been some sort of change of plans we could not have foreseen. Oh well, I suppose in the end I still have a role to play.
13 uncapped one of her fingers to attack, only to see Bakugo and Kirishima charge in for an attack. A monstrous explosion detonated as a red-haired student let out a taunt towards the man, only for Shock to register as his voice compliments him, sounding utterly undaunted. The black hole hero commanded them to move as a vortex of violent smoke blasts toward them. Several people called out in confusion as they were lifted up off the ground.
I shall scatter you across this facility to meet my comrades and your deaths.
Yells of panic ensued as the vision of the group blackens and more rifts open around the joint, with teenagers falling from them in groups. Ida turned to see a dome of dark spiraling gas dominating his entire field of sight. Midnight's protege screamed as he fell from the sky and landed painfully into a large body of water. The surface tension meeting his skin letting a loud slap echo out along with the splash of his landing. He quickly began to swim to the surface, pondering how the villain must have a warping quirk. How it was a good thing All Might wasn't here as the villains were there to claim his life, and why he wasn't there in the first place. He heard a muffling sound of something approaching him, and turned to see some sort of aquatic quirk holder racing towards him, jaws opening up to, most likely, maul him. Just as the gaping mouth was about to clamp onto him, a long appendage yanked Izuku away with great force, dropping him onto a yacht floating several meters away. The owner of the appendage, a tongue in this case, was Sue Asui, who held Mineta Minoru in her grasp. The diminutive pervert made an inappropriate comment about Sue's breasts, prompting the froggy hero to harshly fling the boy on board as Sue herself climbed up. You saved my life, Asui. Thank you. The taller other greenette said in gratitude, receiving what he believed was a look of annoyance.
I thought I already told you to call me Sue.
The girl's tone had a small amount of exasperation as she hauled herself onto the boat.
This is turning out to be a terrible day of class. Right.
Midoriya agreed with her as he began to recall what the villain had said and began taking apart what he could from his words. They knew our whole schedule and who would be here. They must have gotten into the school files while we were all stuck in the cafeteria, and the teachers were busy trying to get the media off the school grounds. His gaze shifts over to the two adolescents by his side. That means they must have been waiting for the perfect moment to attack, just like Todoroki said they were. A childish voice came from the purple and yellow clad boy next to them, saying how there was no way All Might would die to those villains, until the only girl there cut in.
Think about it though. If the villains really did spend so much time thinking about this attack, then they probably figured out a way to kill him.
Shock filled Izuku as she continued.
And didn't you hear what the smoke guy said? Maybe we should worry more about not getting tortured to death, otherwise we might not survive long enough to see All Might again. Even if he does show up, who knows if you'll even make it out in one piece.
The smaller student got progressively more and more pale as the female continued, insisting the pros would save them and told her to shut up. Suddenly, Asui's head snapped to look at the water around them, as something appeared to be surfacing from the body of water around them. These things turned out to be a large group of aquatic felons who surrounded them, fueling further hysteria from Minoru, as the other male quickly began analyzing what his classmate had said and further probing his mind, trying to come up with motives for why the League of Villains wished to exterminate the symbol of peace. He decided he did not care what their reason was. He had to focus. He had to face the evil around them and help the hero that taught them that his quirk was his own. If they can beat him, then we have to stop whatever it is these bad guys are planning. We have to work together and keep All Might safe. No one at UA knows what's happening. The stance of the Verdinian teenager grew to a more serious one, as all over the facility his schoolmates and his instructors were preparing or already fighting the criminals they were put up against. Several miles away, a blond man let his hand holding a phone drop to his lap, as it once again responded that the number he had called was not available and to try again. He was still not able to contact 13 or Aizawa, who he assumed were both ignoring him. Yagi was contemplating his rookie mistake of spending too much time with hero work before school that he was able to attend the USJ exercise. He debated that he would catch the tail end of the training and say something inspiring, estimating he could achieve a good 10 minutes in his current hero form. He shifted in the lumen figure the public had come to know as All Might and declared he was joining his students, only to choke as a stream of blood sprayed from his mouth. A calm voice called for Yagi to hold his horses, causing the man to quickly acknowledge the owner of the voice, Netsu, the principal of UA. The hero quickly complimented the small creature, as it happily accepted it, as he took out a pad and displayed the news of that morning. He pointed out how Toshinori had resolved 3 incidences in a city within the hour, letting out a sigh. He relented that it was not all his fault and that it was in part due to the ruffians who continued to lurk around the city, despite his presence as the #1 hero, but that he also needed to start taking responsibility since his injuries lowered the amount of time he could spend as a hero. He noticed smoke steaming from the yellow-suited man as he turned back to his civilian form in a plume of smoke, and insisted he stay in the lounge a bit longer. He added that as a teacher of UA, he should start prioritizing his students now, which the blonde agreed with. The skeletal man was then dragged into a long-winded conversation with the mouse, bear, mystery animal as he quietly worried about not being able to contact his fellow teachers at the USJ. Back at said facility, Shoji was using his quirk to listen to the other students, confirming that while they were scattered, they were all within the building. The students' attention turned to the gaseous villain as Sero questioned how they were going to deal with him. 13 called out for the class representative, in which Tenya quickly answered and received a command to run out to alert the UA staff about what was happening. He was reluctant, not wishing to leave his comrades alone until they spoke up, pointing out reasons the villain may be trying to keep them inside. The students got into battle positions as the misty form in front of them grew angry and attacked them, questioning their intelligence for strategizing in front of an enemy. Back in the shipwreck zone, an irritated voice cried out as he stared at his classmate as though he was completely insane. He was denying the idea of them fighting the villains and insisted the best plan was to wait for the pros to save them. Midoriya pointed out that the villains were expecting them to fight in the water, where they had the advantage. The frog-quirked girl next to him agreed, noting how thoroughly the villains must have investigated the joint they were currently resided in. The male pointed out one thing that didn't make sense, which was why Sue hadn't been warped there as well due to the nature of her quirk. She acknowledged his analysis and made note that if they knew about her quirk, they would have warped her into the fire zone instead of a full body of water. They probably separated us because they don't know what our quirks are and to instead overpower us in small groups. He leaned over the edge ever so slightly to look at the villains that were in the water. They have no idea what our quirks are, and for all they know, they could be super powerful. Look at how they refuse to come onto the boat. That proves they're a little unsure. However, that also means they're not going to underestimate us either. They're going to be smart and play it safe. For now. The girl in a jumpsuit drew the attention of the other boys to her, suggesting they discuss their quirks in detail. She explained her quirk allowed her to jump extremely high, climb almost any surface, stretch her tongue nearly 20 feet, regurgitate her stomach, and secrete a mildly toxic mucus. She then admits that in this situation only her tongue and jumping would be useful. The second greenette across from her hesitates, taking a calm breath. My quirk creates a very potent neurotoxin that activates after someone inhales it. The toxin attacks the sensory cortex of the brain and forces the victim to see their deepest fears. He looks at his fellow pupils and was encouraged by the compliments of how incredible his quirk was, and how he used his hallucinatory gas in such a versatile way. I've got these sticky balls. Their strength varies. Depending on how I'm feeling, they may stick to something for a whole day. They grow back as fast as I can pull them off, but I'll bleed if I use too many. He bounces his hand against the sphere he left on the wall of the boat. Oh, and they don't stick to me. I just bounce right off them. The smaller teen looked at the other two students staring at him, and then burst out crying as he said he knew how lame his quirk was, which explained why he was so hesitant on waiting for the pro heroes. Izuku tried to calm the other male down, insisting he had a really amazing quirk, and that they just needed to figure out how to use it. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the boat, as a giant hand made of water slammed into it, starting to make it sink. The villains now eagerly awaited the ship to fully submerge while the purple-haired male freaked out and launched his quirk into the water, only to be stopped by his classmate. The taller male saw how the villains were reluctant to touch the balls and made note of it. The smaller one made a comment of how they'd end up being fish food, as the only girl present questioned his admittance into the hero course, which launched him into a full-on rant. Listen up! A voice came from the calm male standing near the bow of the ship. An enemy that is certain of their victory is bound to make a mistake. All Might said something along those lines in a TV interview a while back. While Minoru questioned exactly what that meant, Sue managed to catch on to Midoriya's plan. He stood shakingly with her tongue around his waist and let out a folk scream of fury, trying to emulate Katsuki to frighten the villains. The teen nodded at Sue, who leaned him over the edge with her tongue. Izuku promptly shot out his gas at high speeds, propelling him around the boat and dousing the area around the boat full of villains. The criminals questioned what was happening, and for a brief moment thought nothing was wrong, until the screaming started. Asui set her classmate back around the boat as the felons begged for help. Some even claimed to their fellow villains, an opportunity for the smallest of the trio who launched a wave of sticky balls, trapping each villain in groups of 2 to 3 and even 4. The frog-like girl nodded at both the boys before grabbing them and hopping off the ship, no longer boxed in by the bad guys.
Well, I guess we passed the shipwreck zone.
Ribbit. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things I'd like to go over before this video ends. Firstly, we got our second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. So go check it out if you're in the mood for some jujitsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here on We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation for you to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 years and up to join the crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, we're always looking for more members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching and have a great day.